The quest for the Grail is not archaeology. It's a race against evil. If it is captured by the Nazis, the armies of darkness will march all over the face of the earth. Do you understand me?
This is an obsession, Dad. I never understood it. Never. Neither did Mom.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files. We are continuing in the world of Indiana Jones with Last Crusade. My name is Steve Morris. I am a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roque. I'm a voiceover artist, consumer of food, and writer, producer, and host here in Los Angeles for currently the Outlaw Nation, my outlet that I'm building from scratch, and excited to be back in the world of Indiana Jones, and even more excited that we skipped the second movie and we're jumping into The Last Crusade, which I love madly and could argue that this may be even better than Raiders of the Lost Ark. We'll find out.
Well, and to help us figure that out, we welcome back Indiana Jones expert, animation writer, actor, and host of the Geek Buddies, Shannon McClung. Welcome back to the Cine-Files.
Thank you so much. I will say co-host of the Geek Buddies.
All three of us. Yeah,
because there are three of us, yes. But thank you so much. I would also agree that Last Crusade, I go back and forth, but Last Crusade today is a better movie than Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I'm going to withhold my opinion until the end of the show. You're going to have to go through the whole thing where you can feel how I think about that. But yes, we are talking about Last Crusade, and we are not talking about Temple of Doom. And because we're not talking about Temple of Doom, I would like to talk just a little bit about Temple of Doom.
Oh, boy.
Well, just because
I'll keep eating.
At least to explain, to sort of say why we're skipping it, which is my guess is that I like the movie more than certainly more than you and probably more than you.
I like Temple of Doom.
I think Temple of Doom is a lesser film, has great craftsmanship. Some of the action sequences in it are brilliant and fantastic. It also has some problematic stuff, and it doesn't hit the level of Raiders or Last Crusade.
It's a great further adventure of Indiana Jones. I would agree. I would say that.
But it's not a prequel.
It's done as a prequel, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, like, I think the mine car sequence is great. I think the bug sequence is really good.
Has one of the best Indiana Jones moments of all the films when you're like, Willie, we are going to die. And they hold on him for just a second. You see this comical frown that he makes that makes me laugh every time.
Well, and it's funny because, like, the things in it are done really well, but you kind of look at, like, why did you want to do that?
Why Short Round? Why have him have that ridiculous accent? Why?
But that's his accent. He's in the Goonies. That's how he talks in the Goonies.
Yeah. But they play it up like big time.
He does. He's a child. He's not playing anything up.
Look, I didn't interrupt you when you were making your points about how much you love the film. I'm just saying this is the things that bother me, and also how they handle the Indian culture in there. Many people have spoken about that. Many Indian people have spoken about that too. And India, but I mean the country of India is what I mean. Indian people have spoken about how they present their culture. But it is brought up, this idea of him taking artifacts. I think it's brought up in Temple of Doom, which I think is fantastic. I like that because I can't remember where in Sri Lanka or wherever he was that he supposedly took this artifact and explored that. So there are definitely some redeeming qualities of Temple of Doom, certainly. But I think some of the ways they handle the villain are just very ham-handed and very 80s in their disrespect of a culture.
Well, and the Kate Capshaw character is such, and it's funny, like, the intention was to make her a ridiculous damsel in distress, and they successfully make her a ridiculous. But she's so irritating to me at a certain point, that and yet I will totally watch Temple of Doom. I like what I like about it. It's also way more scary and violent. With the literally taking
a heart out,
eating hearts out of people's chests. And the voodoo stuff, and it's freaky. I mean, there's some freaky stuff in that movie.
And I think this is where he met her, right? Isn't this where? So he left Amy Irving and goes with Kate Capshaw. So a little of that's mixed in here.
He's actually said the best thing to come out of Temple of Doom is me meeting my wife.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Lucas actually said the reason that Temple of Doom was so dark, he's like, I was going through a divorce at the time, and this is what I wanted.
I really hated women, and I wanted to make a movie.
Well, and yet I think both Lucas and Spielberg kind of knew that they had missed the target a little bit, and that's what leads us into Last Crusade, and the idea that we're going to do another one, and that part of it was to go back to the fun and the sense of adventure of the first film. And then they went out and they had a whole bunch of scripts written, including by Chris Columbus, who wrote a script. And there was things about haunted mansions and monkey kings and ghost stories in Scotland and seeking the fountain of youth and all of these ideas. And it's Spielberg's idea was to introduce Dad, was that there was the heart of the film was going to be about the relationship with the father. And Lucas initially is against this idea. They bring in the writer from Empire of the Sun to write, and didn't like that script. Mm-hmm. Lucas has the idea of doing young Indiana Jones, and Spielberg is against it because he had just done Empire of the Sun with a lead kid, and it hadn't been a big success. Right. I actually like that movie.
It's a tough movie.
It's tough, but there's some really good things in it.
And it's Christian Bale, isn't it?
You're talking about is Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, yeah. And then he brings, and then
where are my parents? But Steve, this is not, and not to cut you off here, but like this, the ideas that they're kicking around at this time, one of them does spark Crystal Skull later on. This idea of aliens and all that kind of stuff. That was one of the ones they proposed as well. But they went back to the formula that worked before. As you said, the joy, the stunts, the fun, and a biblical thing they're going after, the Holy Grail. So yeah.
And they finally bring in Jeffrey Boehm, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, who was the writer for Inner Space. Not a movie I think we'll do on the Cine-Files, but one I totally loved at the time.
It was good stuff.
It was a lot of fun. I haven't watched it in a long time.
It's a good movie.
The other thing I didn't know is that one person they brought in to do rewrites, who's uncredited, is Tom Stoppard.
Wow.
Tom Stoppard came in and wrote on the script, and he did a big dialogue polish. He did lots of character changes. He was the one who had Donovan drinking the wrong Grail. He did a lot of work on the Elsa relationship, the final dad moments. That's Tom Stoppard.
And it makes all the sense in the world.
By the way, Tom Stoppard, one of the great playwrights of all time, in case you didn't know.
It makes sense though, because I mean, one of the drawbacks sometimes people speak about Lucas, and we spoke about it before we got on the mic, is his writing ability is not always the best. So you bring in one of the greatest playwrights ever in the history of man, Tom Stoppard, to take a look at this kind of stuff and bring out the best of these characters. And it's no surprise that some people like Shannon and I, and we don't know what Steve thinks Last Crusade is better or rivals Raiders of the Lost Ark because of some of the scenes, the dialogue, and the interactions. It's also not a surprise that Spielberg went to the dad thing. That has always been his thing.
Big thing for Spielberg,
right?
Absolutely.
The dad stuff is always massively big in all his movies. Look at Jurassic Park. The dad has the two kids. Like, it's all there within the whole storyline of his movies, right? Even Empire of the Sun, it's this idea of the kid trying to find his parents, right? Well, it's all massively part of it.
I hadn't thought about it until you just said it. But so many of the movies are the dad is gone.
Yes.
Dad is going away.
Or
where it's Close Encounters, where dad is going nuts, or you're in E.T., where there's a weird relationship with dad, and that this is the movie of dad coming back, of finding, this is the reuniting with dad that maybe Spielberg never really had on some level. Yeah. And talking about one of course, the biggest choices to make is who's going to play dad?
Right.
And Spielberg's line is, only James Bond could play Indiana Jones' dad.
That's great.
Which I love. And that, of course, is Sean Connery. I will say it many times in the course of this podcast. I think Sean Connery's performance in this movie is so great.
One of his best.
Yeah, stellar.
And so different from anything else he's done because he's so quirky and odd and silly and weak and comedic in so many ways, which
he's vulnerable in ways that you've never seen before in any other movie.
Yeah.
And he, in real life, he's only like, what, 8 years older than?
He's 12 years older than Harrison Ford.
Still.
It would have been a scandalous pregnancy.
So that's like me playing your dad in the next movie.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And then you're both sleeping with the same woman in the movie. But anyway, we'll get to that later on in the film.
Well, let's get into the film. Because again, we start with the Paramount logo, and the Paramount logo fades into these rocks, and we're off in Arches National Park in Utah, and we see some horses in the distance, and it's a bunch of Boy Scouts. Here's my question. Was there anything in the publicity? Did you know ahead of time that you were going to see the young Indiana Jones? I don't think I did.
I don't recall.
But I have to say that I don't recall, but maybe.
But I feel like it was known that River Phoenix was playing him.
That we did know. And we didn't know if it was going to be a flashback or what the point was. Or there were rumors, I think, also that River was going to take over the role down the road. And I want to be honest with you, if he had lived, absolutely he would have taken over the role kind of in a weird roundabout way and played it again after Harrison Ford.
You know what? I realize I haven't asked you this question, which is very important, which is, Shannon, how did you first come to this film?
Summer 1989. It was one of my neighbors that I was friends with, Tommy Vera, who I've probably not spoken to in 30 years.
Shout out, Tommy.
Tommy, if you're listening.
To Tommy Vera.
Tommy, can you hear me?
In Orlando, one of our moms dropped us off at the Cineplex Odeon, and we went in, and it was the kickoff of the summer, because I remember we weren't in school, so it probably I would have seen it a couple of weeks after it came out, but I just remember watching that movie, and I saw Temple of Doom in the theater, but I was very young, probably a little too young to watch that movie, I was the perfect age to watch Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I remember just the excitement that we felt, and looking over at Tommy, who was a little squeamish, and it's not as squeamish, or Last Crusade isn't as squeamish as like Raiders or Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom, definitely.
But a handful of moments I looked over at Tommy and I could tell it wasn't sitting right with him.
Right.
But walking out of that theater, I mean, just the summer of '89 was so great that you got Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, you got the first Batman movie.
Right.
At the time, I thought Ghostbusters 2 was amazing. Summer '89 was great.
Right.
How about you?
Same thing, kind of with my best friend Maurice. I think we went to see it together. Summer of '89. This was after the first year of college. So my first trip through college, or no, actually, yeah, my first trip to college. So he's come back from James Madison. I'm still living at where I'm living in Virginia, and we go and see this thing. And it was like, we'd been friends since we were 14 years old. So for us, that going to see the movies was a massive deal. So going to see Indiana Jones, which is Maurice's favorite character, bar none, to go see that film and experience it the way we did. I remember we immediately wanted to go back and see it the next day and see it. We saw it multiple times. Back then you could do it. I mean, back then you did that. You went to see a film multiple times.
We didn't have stuff.
Yeah, right, exactly. To distract us.
Yeah. I saw it. By the way, I just because we're not doing it on the Cine-Files, is that my Temple of Doom, where I saw that, is one of my favorite where I came to that movie, which is I saw Temple of Doom in the city of Haifa in Israel with Hebrew subtitles, or with it was, I think, dubbed in Hebrew with English subtitles. I think that's how I saw Temple of Doom. I saw Last Crusades. I was living in Walnut Creek. I was working at the comic book store, Flying Colors Comics, in Concord at the time, and we saw it not in the Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles, but the Cinerama Dome in Concord. And it was same as you, one of the great just movie-going experiences. I'm sure I saw it multiple times in the movie theater.
Yeah. Do you remember the trailer that they had? I don't know if they ever actually did a proper trailer for the movie, but they did a behind-the-scenes in production now, where they had the director's chairs folding out with Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Harrison Ford, and then Sean Connery.
Well, and then the Harrison Ford stapling the hat to his head.
They showed it was behind the scenes of the tank chase.
We should put that up on the Facebook page.
Sure, of course, sure. Definitely will. So we're in the movie, and we see these Boy Scouts, and the Scoutmaster says, don't wander off. Some of the passageways can run for miles.
Herman's horse sick.
And we're in a cave, and there's two scouts, and one of them stops, and one of them, we don't see his face. It's just like Raiders of the Lost Ark. We withhold the face of River Phoenix as young Indiana Jones, and they stop and they see something, and we see a rope going down, and there's some kind of excavation going on in this cave, and we see the back of Indiana Jones, I assume, because you see the silhouette, you see the body, you see the hat, you see the leather jacket, and I love this bait and switch. We're like, oh, there's Indy. I totally remember being fooled by this in the theater, and then the camera pushes in as he turns around. It's not Indiana Jones. And we see in his hand the cross of Coronado, and we hear its theme, because, of course, everything in a John Williams film is going to have a theme. And then we hear the kid say, Indy.
Indy? What are they doing?
And now we see River Phoenix as Indiana Jones. This is a great switch at the opening.
Well, and such a great performance by River Phoenix. I mean, just perfectly adapted all of Harrison Ford's mannerisms.
Yeah. Well, and he had worked with Harrison Ford on Mosquito Coast.
Right.
Which I had forgotten about. I haven't seen that movie in forever. I love that movie. Yeah. Might be Harrison Ford's best performance.
Wow.
I mean, just because he's playing such an intense and troubled and difficult character, you know. Apparently, River Phoenix used to imitate Harrison Ford on the set of Mosquito Coast. And it was Harrison Ford's idea that River Phoenix play the young version.
Oh, wow. Give me another take.
And now we see that it's Utah, it's 1912, and the young Indiana Jones says,
"That cross is an important artifact. It belongs in a museum."
and this is what I think I said this in Raiders, is that in Raiders, he kind of is in it for the money on some level. And now we're sort of saying, no, he has a very strict moral code. And as he's telling his buddy, like, to go off and find the Scoutmaster and you do this stuff, there's a snake in the guy's lap. And what does young Indiana Jones do?
It's only a snake.
Only snake. Picks it up. And we're like, wait a minute. Why is he not scared of snakes? I love these plants and payoffs.
Yeah.
They're so good. And Indiana Jones goes and steals the cross. And like in all Indiana Jones films, does he have a good plan?
No.
He's just making it up,
as he goes.
And he sneaks away and he makes a noise and the bad guys look up and go,
He's got our thing.
outside, and he runs down the hill, calls out and realizes
Everybody's lost but me.
And now we're on to a chase. And he whistles for his horse. And the horse runs up and he goes to jump down on the horse. Miss. Bad guy whistles for some cars and he's on the horse and he gallops away. And we are in a completely different landscape. Because now we're in Colorado.
Oh.
It looks nothing like where he was at all. It's like a grassy field when he was just in the middle of Utah. But that's okay. And we come up on a circus train. Do you know what Steven Spielberg's first movie he ever saw in a movie theater is?
I don't know. The General?
The Greatest Show on Earth.
Oh.
Which is Cecil B. DeMille's Academy Award for Best Picture winning circus movie.
Yeah.
Is probably one of the biggest this should not have won Best Picture movies.
Yes.
And in it is a circus train that crashes. Which I just found interesting that we end up on this circus train. And he climbs onto it, and the bad guys get on the train, and he runs past some giraffes, and he falls, and the bad guys are getting closer, and he goes into the reptile car. And inside the reptile car, we see alligators and lots of snakes, and he's on this little scaffold above the thing, which breaks and dumps him into a box of snakes. It's a lot of snakes, too.
Yeah.
It's not quite Well of Souls number, but it is like 100, 200 snakes on top of him.
But proximity.
Yeah. And of course, this is how he gets his fear of snakes. And outside, we even see that there's a snake in his shirt that he has to get out. He gets grabbed by one guy. He kicks him away. He gets hooked on his leg. He falls down into another car. And by the way, this train stuff was all shot on Universal backlot. And what they did was they had inflatable tubes on the side of the train that supported him, and they put air in and out of the tubes, which is what created the rocking motion. Oh, wow. By the way, lions do not like rocking motions on trains. It's something we're going to get to. And as they're fighting on top of the train, a lantern or something falls down and hits a rhino. And now the rhino horn starts coming up through the roof where he's wrestling with this guy. And we have this moment we talked about before, which is two guys fighting, and then they realize that they are in it together.
Yeah.
And they work together to get out of the way of the rhino horn, which hits near their crotches, or his crotch. Indy sees a water pipe and jumps on it and swings around in a great Indiana Jones moves and runs face to face with who I'll call his doppelganger. I don't know if he has a name. Does he have a name?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not that I remember.
Man with a hat guy. And he says there's no way out of this, and Indy falls through the roof and
Very
goes...
poorly maintained train.
I know, right?
True.
Like, you would think this rhino and lion and alligator probably could have gotten out a while ago. Now he's face to face with the lion, and he's scared and looks back on the wall, and what does he see? The whip. It's just such a great a great moment because we see it before he sees it, and he grabs it and takes the whip to keep the lion away, cracks the whip, and it hits him on the chin, and we get Harrison Ford's scar.
Yep.
There's something so pleasurable about this origin story. You're seeing all the stuff that makes up Indiana Jones happen right in this whole sequence. By the way, Harrison Ford got that scar from a car crash. He crashed into a telephone pole when he was like 20 or something.
Wow.
Tracks.
Tosses up the whip to the guy who pulls him out just as the lion attacks. And his doppelganger says, "You got heart, kid, but that belongs to me." And Indiana Jones says it belonged to Coronado. This should be in a museum. Yeah. And just as they're grabbing for him, a snake comes out of his sleeve onto them, makes them let him go. He goes into the caboose, which is the magic place, like the magician's home, which, by the way, the name on the caboose I think was
It's like Dr. Fantasy or something.
and it is apparently Frank Marshall, the producer, did a magic show, and that was the name of his magic show when he was a kid. And he gets in on the chest, and the bad guy comes in, goes, "Okay, kid, get out of there," and the chest collapses because it was a magic trick. And there's Indiana Jones running away from the back of the train, and we hear his theme. One thing about the music. This movie has almost wall-to-wall music. It's like a 2 hour and 6 minute movie, and it has like an hour and 58 minutes of music or something like that. In this sequence alone, there are 55 sync points just in this opening. And what that means is, so when you work with a composer, you do what's called a spotting session. And in a spotting session, you sit down and you go through the film with time code, which means every second, and you talk about what's supposed to happen. And it might be, at this moment, we want to have a tension build, and at this moment, we had tension release, and this moment, we want to have a scary moment, and this moment, the tempo picks up, or whatever it is. And the composer will write down each of those things, and then they have to compose music that does all of this stuff. 55 different little points like that John Williams had to hit in about 4 or 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just amazing. He runs home. We get to the Jones house. We see it says Jones on the mailbox. And he runs in. We do not see Dad at this moment, which I think is a great choice. And he goes past the dog who barks. That dog is Indiana.
Yeah.
And he wants to tell Dad something really important. And Dad says,
Wait, count to 20.
No, Dad, you listen.
Junior!
and he starts counting.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In Greek.
He starts counting in Greek. And as he's counting in Greek, there's his Boy Scout friend with his trumpet, and he runs up and he has brought the sheriff. And by the way, what is Dad working on at this moment? He's working on the Grail book.
Yeah.
May he who illuminated this illuminate me.
And in walks the sheriff, which is just what Indiana Jones want. He starts to tell him, I saw these guys, they're stealing this thing. And the sheriff's like, yeah, do you have it? And he goes, yeah, I do have it. Good, because the rightful owner won't press charges if you give it back to him. And who's there but his doppelganger?
I want to say something real quick. So the guy who plays Henry Jones Jr. in silhouette there is not Sean Connery. It's Alex Hyde White, who Shannon and I have worked together with at Universal Studios.
Oh.
He was one of the original wand keepers at Universal Studios in Hollywood. And he never fails to tell you that story, that he is in this movie. He runs a lot of voiceover groups here in Los Angeles for a lot of things. But that is his arm that you see silhouetted in the light, telling him to stop and saying, count in Greek Indiana, Alex Hyde White. He has another nickname. I forget, Puncher or something like that.
I think it's Punch. Yeah.
Punch White, yeah.
Did he do the voice?
I think he did the voice because he does voiceovers. So I think
Of Sean Connery?
Of Sean Connery in that
Of course
moment.
they got Sean Connery to record the voice.
Okay.
I don't know. His voice sounds a little different.
Yeah, that's why I think it's him. It's
Yeah.
a younger version of him, and he's in there, yeah.
And another one of his claims to fame is he is Mr. Fantastic in the Roger Corman Fantastic Four film.
That's true. That's true.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting cat, that Alex Hyde White. And he's credited in IMDb as Henry Jones Jr., so.
Nice. And the doppelganger goes up to Indiana Jones and says,
You lost today, kid. But it doesn't mean you have to like it.
puts the hat on Indiana Jones's head. So in this sequence, we have gotten the scar, the whip, the snakes, the hat. It belongs in a museum, and his whole style of adventuring without a plan and just getting through all this stuff. Is an amazing origin story.
And his want for Dad's approval.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
And the Grail book.
Yep.
Which
And
will
the Grail
be
book.
what we're going after later on and what will be used by Indiana later that Hitler signs.
Yeah.
So all of that is there in this one. And it's why this flashback is used, right? Not just to show you those little things that are fun for like fans of Indiana Jones. It's to lay the groundwork for this was probably the seminal moment of Indiana Jones's life where everything about him as a
100%.
person is encapsulated in this one adventure moment.
So for those of you screenwriters out there who want to know like what you have to accomplish in a short space of time, here's a good example.
Yeah.
An absolutely thrilling action sequence that also does all this heavy lifting to get us where we're going.
Full of exposition.
And by the way, one other person we haven't introduced is there's a guy in a white suit. And he is the guy who wants this cross of Coronado.
Right.
And we have an amazing time transition because the hat goes on young Indiana Jones's head, who lowers his head down. And then the head that comes back up is Harrison Ford in the rain getting punched in the face.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Fantastic. This whole boat sequence was shot back at Elstree Studios, and there are 3,000 pounds of water going around. The waves in this sequence are crazy. It looks just terrifying because it's not fake. And
No.
if you get hit with a giant wave, you're getting hit with a giant wave. And we see it's, by the way, this is a 60 by 40 foot deck. It's on huge, huge gimbals. And there is the guy in white who we saw earlier, a little bit older because it's now 1938. And he is taking the cross back from Indiana Jones. So we know that Indiana Jones has been going after the cross of Coronado this whole time.
This is the second time I've had to reclaim my property from you.
That belongs in a museum.
So do you.
And they go to throw him overboard. A huge wave comes and he kicks one guy overboard. He flips another guy. More huge waves are coming in. My note here is ridiculous waves. He grabs the guy in white, gets the cross, fights two more guys. The cross is going overboard. He dives for it. More huge waves come. They grab him and he punches two guys with one punch. We hear the Indiana Jones themes as he climbs up off the boat on a hook, swings off, lands in the water. More waves come in and the boat blows up.
Yeah.
And Indy finds magically a life preserver.
Well, and as the boat goes down, do you see the name of the boat?
It's
Coronado.
Coronado. And the hat floats by and we hear the theme. The hat gags. Just fantastic. And we cut to, and again, this is going back to the original What Was Wonderful About Raiders of the Lost Ark. We go back to college.
Yeah.
And he's teaching a class. And we hear a bunch of stuff in the class. One of them is archaeology is the search for fact, not truth. If it's truth you're interested in, Dr. Tyree's philosophy class, which I like. And then he says, we do not follow maps to buried treasure, and X never, never marks the spot. Great setup for a payoff. And then as the class is ending, Marcus comes in and he says, I got it.
And one quick thing, Steve.
Yeah.
So I watched the movie in preparation for this, and after talking about Raiders with him in the classroom, and we see sort of his liking of the ladies.
Yes.
As the students are filing out, he is definitely giving the eye to a couple of students to the point that I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Well,
he might be that guy.
Yeah, he might be.
Oh, I think he is. It's a different world.
Yeah.
How long have I been looking for that? All your life?
And then we get into, well, we could discuss my honorarium over dinner with champagne you're buying. Yes, yes, my treat, which I love. And then I love Indiana Jones's office, which is basically like a big storage room filled with stuff. And apparently when he has office hours, there are hundreds of students who are desperate to talk to him. I've had office hours. It never goes like this.
You've never had to escape out a window?
Right. Which is what he does after getting a package that came from Venice. And as he walks out, there's some strange guys pull up in a car, kind of surround him. And we go, what are these guys? Are these Nazis? Are these government guys? And we show up at a beautiful apartment. And some kind of a party is going on, and a man in a tux comes up.
I trust your trip down was comfortable, Dr. Jones. My men didn't alarm you, I hope. My name is Donovan, Walter Donovan.
And this is Julian Glover. He originally auditioned to play like just a sergeant. Didn't get the part.
Yeah.
And then they called him up and said, no, we want you to do something else.
Because he had worked on Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, that's right.
He was the AT-AT commander at the beginning.
He's great in this. And we kind of talked that he's a big contributor to the museum. He's a big collector of antiquities. And he shows him this stone piece, asks him to translate it. It's Latin. And he says,
Who drinks the water I shall give him, says the Lord, will have a spring inside him welling up for eternal life.
And then he stops reading. Where the cup that holds the blood of Jesus Christ resides forever. We're talking about the Holy Grail. Yep. It's interesting that they didn't call it Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail. They called it Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which I think is a better title.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
By miles.
And, of course, as soon as we mention the Grail, we hear the Grail theme. This is just what we saw in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Every important idea or artifact or character has their own theme.
The Holy Grail, Dr. Jones. The chalice used by Christ during the Last Supper. The cup that caught his blood at the crucifixion and was entrusted to Joseph of Arimathea.
And then we hear a little bit more of this story, which is about the Grail lore. This is real Grail lore. That the Grail, of course, is either or both of the cup that Jesus drank out of at the Last Supper and or the cup that caught the blood of Jesus at the crucifixion, depending on which version of the Grail, and it could be both. And that there's this idea that these three brothers went and they found the Grail, and two of them came back, and one of them was still guarding the Grail, and they lived for a really, really long time, and we're finally getting the markers to find where the Grail actually is. And Donovan is really excited about this eternal life thing.
An old man's dream.
Every man's dream, including your father's, I believe.
Oh.
And you see that shift in Harrison Ford's face.
Yeah. And I love his description of his father. He says, Grail lore was his hobby. He's a teacher of medieval literature, the kind students don't want to get. Which, based just on the count to 20 in Greek, you're pretty sure what kind of teacher this guy was.
This tablet is one of those markers. It proves the knight's story is true.
And I'm like, look, that's not proof.
Yeah.
But Donovan thinks it's proof. And of course it is proof, because we're going to find out that they are true, and that we need to find the second marker. And that we hear that their project leader believed that tomb to be located in Venice, Italy. He doesn't say who the project leader is. And we're about to complete this quest that began 2,000 years ago. And Indiana Jones says that's usually when the ground falls out from under your feet. Foreshadowing. Yep. Because the ground is going to fall out from under people's feet at the end of this movie. And then we find out that the project leader has vanished, and I want you to pick up the trail where he left off. Find the man, and you will find the Grail.
You've got the wrong Jones, Mr. Donovan. Why don't you try my father?
We already have. Your father is the man who's disappeared.
Great reveal.
Talk about burying the lead. And now we're back at Dad's home, which has been tossed. It's all a mess. And we're with Marcus, who we find out was friends with Dr. Jones for a long time, and that he watched the two of them grow apart. And they look, and even the mail has been opened, which makes him remember this book. And he opens up this package that's from Venice, and it is Dad's Grail diary. This is every clue. Everything that he ever found out about the Grail has been written down in this thing. And we're going, why would he send it to me? And by the way, behind them on the wall, we see an image of Christ on the cross, and we see the Grail. And there's another image on the wall of a knight walking between two cliffs, which of course is the leap from the lion's mouth that we're going to see later in the film.
Do you believe the Grail actually exists?
The search for the cup of Christ is the search for the divine in all of us. But if you want facts, Cindy, I've none to give you. At my age, I'm prepared to take a few things on faith.
Again, we're back to things from Raiders of the Lost Ark of, do you believe or not believe? Do you have faith? And Indiana Jones as the doubter on some levels, and Marcus is the believer on some levels. And he says, call Donovan, tell him I'll take the ticket to Venice. And Marcus says, I'll tell him you'll take two. Marcus is going on the trip.
Which, for this movie, they had to change his character a little bit. Because in Raiders, he was the father figure.
Yeah.
And when the actual father comes in, they were able to make him more of a comic presence.
It's what's so hard, and we'll get to it, obviously. And I can see from your face, I think you feel the same way. I think the comedic stuff is really funny.
Right.
And I really hate that they did this to his character.
Yeah, because his character was so capable of everything in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was so on top of everything, more than Indiana even in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. To see him turn into essentially a comic figure like Marion was in Raiders of the Lost Ark is tough for me.
No, he's way more comic. He's a comic figure like Kate Capshaw is in Temple of Doom.
Sure, but
Marion's capable.
She's certainly capable, but then they throw her into these stumbling situations and whatever. Those things they
Not
use,
like Marcus.
They used. I'm just saying that so it's comparable in that all three of them are used as comic relief. Kate Capshaw, her, and him, just at varying degrees.
But where I would push back slightly,
sure,
and. This isn't a perfect point because Indiana Jones has a line later on that kind of kills it.
If it's not perfect, don't say
it. He's capable in his environment. Like when he is at the when he's I know that's the line. That's the line I'm talking about. When he's around his surroundings, he does seem very capable. And then you plop him into the field and he's hopeless.
Yeah.
But yes, we'll
get to that
line.
we fly off to Venice. They're shooting this. This is at the Grand Canal. They had control of the Grand Canal from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. to get this stuff. Have either of you been to Venice?
No.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my favorite places in the world. It is so beautiful. It's so serene. I can't imagine shooting there. I mean, first of all, this is in the middle of tourist season. It is hugely crowded in Venice, but there's also no roads. So, like, movies production run on trucks. Like, they had to bring everything in by boat. They have huge tourists they have to deal with. There's water everywhere. Like, this is a really difficult place to shoot, but it is an amazing place to shoot. And we hear that we're supposed to be met by Dr. Snyder. How are we going to recognize Dr. Snyder? And then we hear
Dr. Jones?
And we see that Dr. Snyder is a woman, which they don't expect.
I knew it was you. You have your father's eyes.
And my mother's ears. But the rest belongs to you.
We get a little bit of shameless flirting, which is sort of silly. Because when you said, I wonder, is he that guy? Yes, he is. He's going to come on to the first pretty girl he sees. This, by the way, is Alison Doody. She was 21, and she's Irish. She played, I don't remember which Bond movie she's in, but she's a Bond girl, and her character in the Bond movie is Jenny Flex.
Well, there you go.
And she's Elsa Schneider.
The last time I saw your father, we were in the library. He was very close to tracking down the Knight's tomb. I've never seen him so excited. He was as giddy as a schoolboy.
Doesn't he call him hair professor or something like that?
He says hair professor is never giddy, yeah. And that apparently what happened was she went off to some map room in the library and she left him there. And when she came back, he was gone. And all they found was a scrap of paper that had some Roman numerals on it. And now they come to the library, which is like a converted church, and they go inside. And we find out that this literally is holy ground and there could be tombs underneath. And then he recognizes the window and realizes the window is in Dad's diary. And that's where they discover the Roman numerals 7, 8, and 9. And the big question is, where's 10?
Yeah.
Where is 10? And they start looking around.
It's like those Sunday panties. Where are the Sunday panties? They don't make them. It turns out they don't make them.
Because of God.
Because of God. It took me a second to get to that reference.
You guys have done When Harry Met Sally, right?
Yeah, we did. Really early. That is one of the one I think was up to be redone because we did it so long ago. It's like our 5th episode or something like that, or 5th or 6th or something. And Indy looks down, kind of sees something, climbs up this spiral staircase. The camera work going with him up the spiral staircase. He looks down. He has a reaction, and the camera comes up behind him, and we see on the ground a huge X.
Yeah, where it marks the spot.
X marks the spot. Again, perfect plant and payoff. He finds kind of a crack there, and when he goes back down, what's so cool is you can't see the X, or you can just barely see it. He had to be at the right angle to be able to see it. He grabs this big stanchion brass pole thing, lifts it up. We cut to the librarian who is stamping books. He brings it down just in sync with the stamp. The librarian looks at his stamp. That's a good gag. And we repeat it, same thing. And this is how he breaks through into the. And again, one of the interesting things is Indiana Jones has no respect for history or anything.
Nope.
He'll just break, and it's like, this is not actually how archaeology is supposed to happen. I'm just going to break through one ancient relic to get to the next one. all you archaeologists out there, this is not how to do it.
No, this is not at all.
Not correct.
You don't disappoint, Dr. Jones. You're a great deal like your father.
Who she's had sex with.
And it's all being laid, like, if you're watching it the first time, you don't necessarily pick that up, right? But when the moment is revealed, now you can listen to these lines. You're like, she is laying the groundwork hardcore here about what's happened.
And Jones's response is, except he's lost and I'm not. And they go down, and we see first pagan symbols from the 4th or 5th century, and we kind of think, okay, it's 600 years before the Crusades, and we'll probably find them over that way. And then we see these men with these red fezzes show up, and we hear their theme, and they come up behind Marcus, and they knock him out and drag him away. Down below, we're going by some skeletons. We see a picture on the wall of the Ark of the Covenant. I love this bit.
What's this one?
The Ark of the Covenant.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Pretty sure.
Great.
With the Ark theme.
With the Ark theme playing. Awesome. And then he knocks down another wall, because again, he doesn't give a shit.
Right.
And we see that there's water everywhere that they're wading through, and I guess there's oil on top of the water.
It's petroleum, yeah.
Yes. And then he grabs a leg bone from a skeleton, again, doesn't give a shit, wraps fabric around it, and lights it on fire. Now, if I am wading through oil, my hands are covered in oil, my clothes are covered in oil, I think lighting things on fire would be dangerous.
The movie was getting long. They didn't want to add the part where he wiped his hands.
Yeah, exactly. And they go into another room, and he says, "Ooh, rats." And then we see 5,000 rats. How are you? So in rats versus snakes,
Rats worse.
Rats worse.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, snakes.
I didn't even ask about bugs. The bugs is the worst. That bug scene is like the
worst. Yeah. The bug scene is
in Temple of Doom. I couldn't do that.
Oh yeah.
I could do this. I think the snakes look worse, but actually are not as bad as the rats.
Right.
Because a whole bunch of rats crawling on me with all the little claws.
And biting you and giving you those terrible diseases.
Well, they won't give you the terrible diseases, and I'll tell you why.
Oh.
All of these rats were bred for this film in a completely clean environment.
Well, of course, for the movie.
Well, no, but that's kind of
the rats
amazing.
in the movie is what I mean. The rats that are in the movie could give you whatever because they've been down there for so long.
Sometime before they go into production, someone says, we're going to need 5,000 rats. And they go, well, we're going to breed them all ourselves. We're going to get a facility to breed 5,000 rats so that 6 months from now or whenever this is, a year later, that's crazy.
If you could guarantee no bites, would you still say rats are the worst? Because it's the slithering, the unnatural motion of slithering. That's what makes me.
Have you handled snakes?
I've touched one before.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I kind of held a snake, I was like, that's not so bad.
At least the rat's worse. All those little fingers, those little toes.
And the guys with the red fezzes are following them into the rat tunnel. By the way, the sound design, because I love all Ben Burtt's sound design, for rats is chickens. Those are chicken sounds. Indy and Elsa are walking along a ledge, and we can see in the wall rats coming in and out of the wall and dropping down on them. By the way, one thing about rats versus snakes or bugs are impossible to train.
Right.
They're bugs. Snakes, really, you can't train. Their brains are very small. Rats, you can train. So they had them on the set practicing what they were doing 4 times a day so they could train them to come out of this thing or walk down that way or do stuff like that. Yeah. So
would we call that training, just aiming them in the direction you want them to go?
Absolutely,
You
because
think?
they have a reward at the end, and when they do it, they get the reward. And so, yes, absolutely is training.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's called operant and conditioning is its name. Finally, they find the tomb that's kind of higher than the rest. They push off the lid. There's the knight. We hear the Grail theme as they do this, and they found it. And it's a shield that looks like the other marker, and they does a copy of it.
Just like your father. Giddy as a schoolboy. Wouldn't it be wonderful if he were here now to see this?
He never would have made it past the rats. He hates rats. He's scared to death of them.
So again, we have another connection between the Joneses.
Yeah.
They both have phobias about particular animals.
Well, and he's kind of giddy as he's saying.
No,
True.
He never would have made it past the rats. He's scared to death of them.
And what does the guy in the red fez do? Drops a match. big, huge wall of flame. By the way, none of the rats were burned. They built mechanical rats for the ones in the fire.
Who's fighting for the rats? Who would be upset about the rats being burnt to death? Who's upset about the rats?
The ASPCA, who said no animals were harmed.
Rats are animals?
PETA?
Yes. What's your definition of animals that wouldn't include rats?
Cuddly things? I don't know.
No, snakes are animals.
Snakes are fine. Rats.
Bugs are animals.
I think you can kill rats. You can't kill mice. I think you can kill rats. Oh, well. That's my own personal point of view.
My sister had a pet rat growing up. It was very nice. His name was Snoopy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was nice.
Okay.
Yeah. But the flames are coming. At first, they see the rats charging for them to get away from the flames. They flip over the stone sarcophagus, which is probably weighs 700 pounds. And they get under it. And now we have flames all around, rats coming in. Indy swims away, then comes back and gets her. It's really scary with her in the coffin with the flames and the rats coming in all over her.
I think I found a way out. Deep breath.
And then they swim out and manage to pop up a sewer somewhere in the middle of Venice. And what I love is that, so what that means is that there was a perfect tunnel connection between the Venice sewer
Good point.
and the sarcophagus containing this knight who has the directions to the Holy Grail.
Very difficult to get a table at that outdoor cafe.
Yeah. Well, what's so cool about just go to the sewer there, the street, opposed to let me figure this all out, you know? Brainy people. Anyway, yeah.
And as they come out in this cafe, here comes the guys with the guns and in the fezzes, and they run, and we go down to the water and jump in a speedboat. Those are cool speedboats.
Yeah.
My friend Matt Garcia, who grew up with boats, said, no, that's a very specific, very fancy, but I can't remember the name of what they actually are. And we go into a boat chase.
Yeah.
The shot, by the way, of them pulling out, her driving away, and the guy running and jumping on the boat just as it pulls away at full sprint, that's a great stunt. It's just a really good timing to pull that off. Allison had never, the woman playing Elsa had never driven a boat before. Apparently she hit a lot of stuff. And I like that the crew said to her, no, it's fine. You're doing fine. Because that's what you say to actors. Right. You know, inside they're going, oh my God, this is not good.
And I'm wondering how much stuff there was on the water for her to hit.
Listen, I don't know.
If you have no roads,
it's true.
You gotta have stuff in the water. I guess.
There's a big fight with Indy and the guy on the back of the boat, which is going on, and we're coming up to two huge ships.
Are you crazy? Don't go between them.
Go between them, are you crazy?
Go between them, you crazy? Then they go between them, and the ships are coming closer together, and we're starting to scrape on the edge, and they just managed to make out, and the boat chasing them crashes through in an explosion and jump. It's great.
Yeah.
Really fun. And there's machine guns firing at them, and the motor starts to smoke, and they're getting rammed, and we see this huge propeller, and Indy's fighting, and he flips one guy off, and the main Fez guy jumps on, and they're getting sucked into that giant propeller, which, by the way, was shot at Elstree Studios at a big tank. And it's shot with a 250 millimeter lens. It's a long lens, and as we said before, that compresses space. So they're not nearly as close to that propeller as it looks like they are. They built an extra long version of that boat to give them a lot more space. But still, it looks really scary, and it looks like they're coming towards the propeller and going to get killed. And he says, why are you trying to kill us? Because you're looking for the Holy Grail. And he says, my father was looking for the Grail. Did you kill him too? No. And then he asks where he is.
If you don't let go, Dr. Jones will both die. And we'll die. My soul is prepared. How's yours?
Yeah, great line. Always love that line.
He totally reminds me of Mandy Patinkin, by the way.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's such a Mandy Patinkin quality, and it's not. His name is Kevork Malikian. But he's great. He has a great, great presence.
The secret of the Grail has been safe for 1,000 years. And for all that time, the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword have been prepared to do anything to keep it safe.
And he asks, why do you seek the cup of Christ?
Is it for his glory or for yours?
I didn't come for the cup of Christ. I came to find my father.
And that's when they agree, okay, I'll tell you where he is.
Yeah,
and
he's
they
also
stop.
got that tattoo.
He's got that great tattoo.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And what we find out is that Dad is being held at some castle in Austria. Great. And it's later on, we're like at a hotel or something, and Marcus is talking to Indy, and what they found out from the tablet was, or from the shield, is that the city that they were looking for to lock in the location for everything else is a place called Alexandretta.
Alexandretta. Now we know.
Yes, now we know.
Marcus, get hold of Sala. Tell him to meet you in Iskenderun.
What about you?
I'm going after Dad.
And he says, I'm going to go after Dad. And he goes over to the other room where we hear some music playing. And the room has been tossed. It's a total wreck. And he finds Elsa in the bath. She asks what were they looking for. And he pulls out the Grail diary.
You had it? You didn't trust me.
Something that's going to come up later. And she starts to get mad. And I love that he says, you're not mad. You like the way I do things.
It's a weird, clumsy flirt here.
It is a weird.
It's overt. It's so overt. There's no subtlety to it.
And grumpy and arrogant and pushy in this really strange way.
You're not mad.
No?
No. You like the way I do things.
It's lucky I don't do things the same way. You'd still be standing at the Venice Pier.
What do you think is going on here? Since I met you, I've nearly been incinerated, drowned, shot at, and chopped into fish bait. We're caught in the middle of something sinister here. My guess is Dad found out more than he was looking for. And until I'm sure, I'm going to continue to do things the way I think they should be done.
And then he kisses her. Aggressively.
Yes.
And her response is, how dare you kiss me? And then she kisses him. And he says, leave me alone. I don't like fast women. And she says, I hate arrogant men.
As she's nibbling on his ear.
Yeah. So I think they're on the same page.
Yeah.
And we head off to Austria. And we're outside, and we're like, well, what are we going to do to get in? And we realize that, this is a castle, and there's like art collections there. And then he sees her beret, and now he has a plan. I think the next beat is, first of all, a gear that we've never seen from Indiana Jones.
True.
A gear we've never seen from Harrison Ford.
Yeah. We've never seen from Harrison Ford. And I don't think would happen if Sean Connery weren't cast in this movie. Because I think that accent he's doing is a Scottish accent. I think this, and it's really funny. It's a very, very funny moment.
Yes? Oh, before time. Do you intend to leave us standing on the doorstep all day with drenched? Look, that gun and caught a sniffle.
I've come for the tapestries.
What do you say? Dear man, he's dense. This is a castle. You do have tapestries.
Tapestries. And the guy says, this is a castle. We have many tapestries. And if you're a Scottish lord, then I am Mickey Mouse.
Which was not the original line.
What was the original line?
The original line was, if you're a Scottish lord, then I am Jesse Owens.
Ooh.
And I want to say that in the theater, it might have been that, but then the reason they gave for changing it to Mickey Mouse, like, well, we don't know if everyone's going to know who Jesse Owens was, but there's also some heavier connotations when you throw that out.
I think that's a great line, and I'm okay. I think that is a way more interesting line. Mickey Mouse is not as good a line, and yes, and it's funny. Like, I do get not everyone would get it. But for those who do get it, it would be great.
I don't know. I wouldn't have liked it. I like the Mickey Mouse line because it's an American shot, right? That I'm Mickey Mouse, and Mickey Mouse symbolizes America. The Jesse Owens thing certainly fits for the time, right? Because the Nazis and all that kind of jazz. I don't know.
This would have been post the
This is a white guy saying he's Jesse Owens, right?
Yeah, it's 30. It's 38. So it's well, but that's the joke. I mean, that's why you're saying it.
Yeah.
It's 38. The Olympics were 36. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very interesting. But Indiana Jones punches this guy out. And they look down, and there we see below them in another room a whole bunch of Nazis. And he says, Nazis. I hate these guys.
Why does it got to be Nazis?
It's funny. He's looking down at them, similar to looking down. That's a great point.
They're snakes and they're rats as well.
Yeah.
They're the same thing.
Snakes, rats,
it's all,
Nazis.
It's all,
Nice. I like it.
Logical symbolism there.
We're exploring in some hallway, and he goes, that's got to be where they're keeping Dad because it's wired. And he goes into the next room. We hear this rain and thunder going on. He goes to the window and grabs his whip, and she's a little worried, and he says, don't worry, this is kiddie play. I'll be right back. Okay. And he uses his whip to catch onto this wire, which I'm like, but it's not an electrical wire. And he swings across, and then he swings back and crashes through the window. How is this a good plan?
Yeah,
like, this seems really loud.
Something. Whenever he says it's handled, I've got it. Nothing's farther from the truth.
But one of the things that Han Solo and Indiana Jones has in common is trust me is bad.
Yeah.
And he gets into this other room. And he stands up, and we see a shadow coming up behind him, and then a big giant vase crashes on his face. And the next thing we hear is
Junior.
And I love that he pops up, obviously stunned, and his first reaction is, yes, sir. Because he goes just right back to childhood training.
It is you, Junior. Don't call me that, please.
This is a great payoff. Oh, yeah. The first time you see it. And then Dad starts to look at the vase and examines it and goes, it's all late 14th century Ming Dynasty. And he says, it breaks the heart.
And the head. You hit me, Dad. I'll never forgive myself.
When you can see in Harrison Ford's face in that moment, like, don't worry, I'm fine. Like, finally, I've broken through.
He cares about me. No, it's just about the vase. And then you see Sean Connery's face change. He looks very relieved. He says, oh, thank God. It's a fake. And then he throws the vase, making more noise, as if Harrison Ford crashing through a window wasn't loud enough. And Sean Connery goes, I'm sorry about your head, but I thought you were one of them. Dad, they come through the doors.
So I was wrong this time. But by God, I wasn't wrong when I mailed you my diary. You obviously got it.
I got it, and I used it.
And he says, like, he found the entrance, and it was in the library. And Sean Connery's performance is so good. As you could see him, like, living vicariously through the moment of finding Sir Richard, and that he was there, and that he found the inscription. And he goes, do you find the inscription? And Indiana Jones says, Alexandretta.
Alexandretta, of course. Alexandretta! Junior, you did it.
No, Dad, you did. 40 years.
It's just so great. And then the next one, he's like, oh, I wish I could have been there. It's like, there were rats, Dad.
Rats?
Well, and this is this thing that we're going to see is like their chemistry and comic timing, the two of them, is so great.
Oh, it's fantastic. And also this idea of that, look, and it pushes back on this idea that he said earlier to Elsie when he's like, Hair Professor doesn't get giddy. He is giddy all over this scene with Indiana.
Well, but Indiana Jones has never seen that. Right. He's never seen this from his dad.
Right.
What do the Nazis want with you, Dad?
They wanted my diary.
Yeah?
I knew I had to get that book as far away from me as I possibly could.
You didn't bring it, did you?
You didn't bring it,
did you? I love it.
And then, of course, in come some Nazis.
Dr. Jones.
Yes?
And they say, I will take the book now. And both of them say, what book? In your pocket.
You don't. Do you think my son would be that stupid that he would bring my diary all the way back here?
There it is.
You did. I should have mailed it to the Marx Brothers.
But that's the thing, right? It's that Indiana just always finds a way to disappoint his dad. It's just mind-blowing. He's such an intelligent guy. Like, and some people, we have that in our lives. There's that one person that for whatever reason, no matter what we accomplish, that person always finds a way to bring you right back to where you were and keep you in that submissive kind. If you have a dominant submissive relationship with anybody, there's that one person, no matter what you accomplish, finds a way to bring you back in that submissive position. You're like, God damn it, how am I here?
I remember going back, it wasn't like a high school reunion, but it was sort of a reunion-y thing, and I'm with a bunch of friends that I had a long time ago, and I had graduated I had a master's degree, and I was 30, and I was like, I'm going to be able to show how far I've come. And I found myself just inhabiting exactly the same role I'd had with those people, 20 years earlier.
Oh, yeah.
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 It's very strange. And in this moment, he's, Indy's getting mad. I came here to save you.
Oh, yeah? And who's going to come to save you, Junior?
And as they're arguing, you can see, because what's so great about it is you see Indy has a plan, which is he's going to use the argument to distract the guards and to fight. And he said, but Sean Connery is just in the argument.
I told you for this. Don't call me Junior.
And as he does that, he just punches a guard, grabs a gun, and kills a whole bunch of guys. And again, Sean Connery's reaction is so funny.
Look what you did.
What you did.
I can't believe what you did.
And then, of course, our big Nazi comes in with a gun to Elsa and says, put down the gun or the girl dies.
But she's one of them.
Indy, please.
She's a Nazi. What? Trust me.
Indy, no!
I will kill her.
Huh? Go ahead. No! Don't shoot.
And Indiana Jones puts down the gun.
Right.
And Elsa goes to him and says, I'm sorry. And then she takes the book out of his jacket.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this, but most of father-son relationships, the son is always trying to prove he knows better than the dad. And then that moment happens when the dad just goes, see what I told you, you idiot? And this is that moment. He knew she's a Nazi. He's like, shoot her. I don't give a shit. You're not going to shoot her. But Indiana's still trying to win the approval of his father and still trying to be better than his dad, thinks he knows better than his dad, and tries to undercut him. And what happens? Oh, she was one of them. And that happens in almost any father-son relationship.
But what's so great in this movie is that they both save each other multiple times.
Absolutely.
And Henry Jones Sr. does have to reevaluate his son.
Yes.
He does get to see all these things that Indiana Jones can do that he can't do.
Right.
And yet also there are these things where dad is ahead of Indiana Jones. That's what makes this such a great relationship.
Exactly, Stephen. And by the other token, too, Indiana has to reevaluate his father, too, realizing some of the way his father's was because of what he had to do or how he was constructed as a person. Indiana had to also understand. So that's true.
Well, this is the thing, and we'll talk about this throughout, but like, is there a emotional relationship in a past between Indiana Jones and Marion Ravenwood? Sure. Is it really a story that is maintained throughout the film or is important or has a real resolution? No. That movie is a plot-based movie, and it's watching the action of the plot that's really fun. This is not that. Right. We are going to see a real relationship and real evolution of these two characters as they come together, and that is the big difference between these two films.
And that may be the difference why you bring in Tom Stoppard to make it more of a character study as he would do in a play, right?
Yeah. And by the way, the reaction from Harrison Ford when he realizes that he's been fooled is just great. And then we hear the Nazi theme, and Indiana Jones is going, man, you ransacked her own room, and I fell for it. And then he asked Dad, how did you know she's a Nazi?
She talks in her sleep.
Talks in her sleep.
And the smile from Sean.
A self-satisfied smirk.
And the look from Indiana Jones is that sort of solidifies in his brain of what that means exactly. By the way, George Lucas is totally against this plot line.
Oh, sure.
That they both sleep together. He is not a fan of this at all.
Makes no sense.
And what's great is that Sean Connery says, I didn't trust her. Why should you? That didn't stop him from sleeping with her.
Right.
He was totally fine doing that, but he didn't trust her.
Like father, like son.
And now we see Donovan. And we're like, oh, this is the bad guy. And this is the thing that we had in the that we talked about in Raiders is the main bad guy and the two secondary bad guys. So the main bad guy is Donovan, and Elsa and the colonel or whoever the Nazi are the two secondaries. And Sean Connery says, I misjudged you, Walter. I knew you would sell your mother. I can't do the accent.
I knew you would sell your mother for an Etruscan vase, but I didn't know you would sell your country and your soul to the slime of humanity.
I love Sean Connery's voice. His particular accent is so great. And then they realize that there's some pages torn out of the diary. That the map, the most important thing in the diary, the map is gone. Elsa goes, well, he gave them to Marcus.
Marcus? You didn't drag poor Marcus along, did you? He's not up to the challenge.
He sticks out like a sore thumb. We'll find him.
And Indiana Jones says,
The hell you will. He's got a 2-day head start on you, which is more than he needs.
Brody's got friends in every town and village from here to the Sudan. He speaks a dozen languages, knows every local custom. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again. With any luck, he's got the Grail already.
Cut to. Does anybody speak English?
Or ancient Greek.
Or ancient Greek. So first of all, Denholm Elliott is a great actor. And I like, even because where I first saw him was in Trading Places, where he's the butler. And there's a moment where they're planning their revenge on the Dukes, and he walks in, it's Christmas time because he's the butler, and he goes, eggnog. And the eggnog moment with Denholm Elliott is hilarious. He's great at playing this. I don't like what they did to his character, but I can't say they didn't do it successfully.
That's the thing. You can't argue the comedic moments, even though you hate what they did to the character. Yeah.
And he runs into Sala, who's like, where is Indiana Jones? And just as they're talking, he's even reaching into his pocket to pull out the map. And up a German walks up who says he's the director of the Museum of Antiquities. And they've sent a car, and Brody's like, oh, well, this is nice. This is nice. And again, this is a great comedy bit of Sala going, there is no Museum of Antiquities. Run. What did you say?
Well, because the German guy asked for papers.
Papers.
Papers, got it here. Just finished reading it myself. Run.
Yes?
Egyptian Mail, morning edition. Run.
Did you say...
Run. What? And he punches the guy through the paper. And I love Marcus's sort of smile as they run. I'm just like, what's happening?
Just enjoying the whole lunacy.
Yeah. And Sala guides him to some doorway and puts him inside and is standing there ready to fight. When that door closes, it ends up that he just put him in the German truck. Of course, and now, because Indiana Jones could not figure out that she was a Nazi, the Jones boys are tied up.
He's pretty bad with women. like he gets tricked all the time by women in these films. Like, well, it feels like.
Well, and that's his Achilles heel.
Right, it is.
That is his big Achilles heel.
Yeah.
And you can look in Allison Duty's face when Sean Connery is going like, yeah, he's like, I will kill her. He's like, yeah, go ahead. And she kind of looks over, like she betrays it for a second.
Right.
Well, and just his flirting with her when he first shows up and gets off the, arrives in Venice, is that he doesn't find anything out about her. He just immediately is flirting with her.
Yeah.
So I think his powers of deduction in this area are pretty slim.
Yes. Yes.
All the things that he can unearth.
But not a woman's heart.
Yeah, and it's funny when you juxtapose that with Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the women are like throwing themselves at him that are the co-eds, college co-eds. Here in this situation, he actually gets into these situations. It's not as equal.
Well, I know we're kind of joking around this
of course.
a little bit, but there is a part of Indiana Jones that is not evolved. He got frozen in a certain kind of childhood and a certain kind of obsession. We know that he lost his mom. We don't know exactly at what age, and that he had a completely emotionless raising with his father, so he had to figure out a lot of stuff himself.
Yeah.
Well, he's constantly seeking approval, it seems like.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, from every male father figure or every female as well. And even though the flirting, he still wants. And when the situation comes up, when he realizes that they both slept with her, it really dents Indiana's ego, because that's the one thing he could have had over his dad, and even his dad had that over him, and it's just like, oh man.
Okay, you just made me think of a thing that it's all right. So again, this is where we're going off a little bit just on this detail.
I know Steve just started too.
but so Abner Ravenwood,
yes,
Marion's father,
yes,
his mentor. He was a young man, probably a college student or a graduate student. He had just left a relationship with his professor intellectual father where he had minimal connection. And now he's looking for a father figure.
Right.
Like the relationship with Abner Ravenwood just got much deeper in my mind. And then, of course, he has a relationship with his daughter.
Yeah, maybe that's all mixed in his psychological makeup, that there's not a delineation like there would normally be in a situation like that.
Well, it
not excusing it, just saying.
No, well, and this brings up a thing, which is like how things get written, which is my guess is when Lawrence Kasdan is writing the character and he's coming up with the Abner Ravenwood Marion backstory, he wasn't thinking, he had no thoughts of Henry Jones Sr.
Right.
or Indiana Jones's relationship with Dad. He's just going, I'm gonna go have to find this woman. I need to create a conflict. And so he creates a history. And he doesn't have to put a lot of energy into what exactly that history is, because we just know that there's a previous relationship there, that it's kind of fraught with some emotion.
Yeah.
And there's stuff, because it's much better to have a thing with stuff than like, oh, we're looking for the headpiece of the staff raw. Oh, let me call my buddy Abner Ravenwood and I'll go get it. Hey, give me that headpiece. Thanks a lot. That's not dramatic.
Right.
So it creates a drama, but now, a couple movies later, suddenly this ties into his character in a deep way.
Well, also, and if you think back to Raiders of the Lost Ark when he's talking with Denholm Elliott, and Denholm Elliott is sort of warning him against the Ark. He's like, you sound like my mother. He says it in the present tense.
Right.
You don't get the sense that his mother died when he was, like, he had this sort of
which I'm
tragic
sure she
upbringing.
hadn't. Yeah.
Of course.
Hadn't
of
happened
course.
yet. I mean, it happened, but in the timeline of writing, they hadn't figured that out.
There was something else that, like, I forgot to bring this up when we passed that part in the movie, but when Walter Donovan is saying to him, we both have a passion for antiquities.
Yeah.
He does, but he's trying to fill that hole of his father.
Right.
He's like, I do have a passion for antiquities, but mostly I just want my dad to love me.
Yeah.
Well, and this is why this is a deeper movie than Raiders of the Lost Ark, is because there's more stuff here.
I think the whole reason he does this is because of his dad.
Yeah.
I think the whole reason he's a guy who goes and finds these artifacts is because of his dad.
Yeah.
Like it's a competition and also a desire to be approved, to get his approval. It is both at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Well, and it's funny that Indiana Jones, his dad is not a man of action, but is a man of intellect. Yes. And so Indiana Jones is doing the active version of what his father does. His father just does it entirely in the library. And you remember this the scene we had? It's funny. We've just gone off on this whole thing, but there's a lot here, because when we come back and meet Indiana Jones in Last Crusade as the professor, what's he talking about? He's saying, hey, it's not all going out and out on these adventures. It's a lot of time spent in the library,
right?
Which is what his dad probably spent his whole life doing.
It's also why his dad is smarter than Indiana. Indiana being a man of action, he's a smart guy, but his dad is smarter. Like he's ahead of the thing with the girl. He's ahead of the thing with the Nazis. He's just always ahead of these things. The action stuff is what he doesn't. He's not as equipped to handle, which is why you get the great line later on. We'll get to it when Indiana says, "Happens to me all the time."
Yeah,
and it's because that's the arena he knows.
Right,
yeah,
right. I think it's like depth versus speed.
Yes.
Like Indiana Jones is fast at like making a decision on how you do a thing.
Right.
But he doesn't have all that depth of wisdom. Yeah. And so now we're in this moment where they're both tied up, and the question is, should we kill them? And of course, it's Elsa who says, "No, we have to keep them alive." Because, sure, we have the map, but we don't know everything that we need to know. And then she goes to say goodbye.
The Austrian way.
The Austrian way. And again, Spielberg puts the camera in the perfect spot, because Sean is in the foreground and we watch his face as she leans into Indy and is giving him this kiss and says, "I can't forget how wonderful it was." And Sean Connery's little smile and, "Thank you, it was rather wonderful."
The way that they line that shot up, when Harrison Ford kind of looks over his shoulder, you almost think that was an afterthought. Like the purpose of the shot was to get Sean Connery, but then maybe Harrison Ford had this idea of like, what did he just say?
What's so good about it is they handle it so lightly. It's such a deft touch, because this is gross. I mean, like, you had sex with the same woman as your dad.
Man, the 80s were just a weird time.
Well, and this is a family movie.
Yes, it is. Look, Star Wars is brother and sister who possibly seen with each other. Back to the Future is mom going after her son. Like, the 80s were a weird time, man. We were totally cool with incest, apparently.
We think about the 70s as the place where we're in the grid of human stuff, but no, apparently it's Back to the Future.
And apparently it's wholesome to want your son or your sister or whatever. Or your dad.
Spielberg and Lucas, they just gussied it up.
Yeah, right.
And after the Austrian way of saying goodbye, we have the German way of saying goodbye, which is a punch that leads to both heads knocking.
So great.
They do a whole bunch of stuff where there's little Joneses in sync that are just really great little comedic touches.
Let's try and get these ropes loose. We gotta get to Marcus before the Nazis do.
You said he had 2 days start, that he would blend in, disappear.
Are you kidding? I made that up. You know, Marcus, he got lost once in his own museum.
And this is the thing we talked about before.
Yes.
It's like, it's totally funny. They do a great job of it. Denholm Elliott plays this all for brilliant comedy, and it makes me sad. And now, of course, Indiana Jones has a plan, which is reach in my pocket, there's a lighter, and you can burn the ropes that are holding us. And Sean Connery's like, oh, very good. And he reaches in, he gets the lighter, he lights the lighter, he puts it near the ropes, it burns him. He drops the lighter, and now the floor is on fire.
There's a section of history that we don't talk about, and it's the flammability of things made in Austria.
Yeah, a real problem. Because that fire catches fast.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, it goes really fast. And again, Sean Connery's embarrassment about, like, I have to tell you something. And again, the misunderstanding of, like, don't get sentimental. Save it till we're out of here.
The floor's on fire.
The table. They talk about fire as a wild animal on the set. And basically, none of these things are flammable. That's how they do this, is the rug isn't flammable, the chairs aren't flammable, and they have these pipes that shoot out fire. Have you worked with fire in some of the like Universal shows?
Yeah. There was at Islands of Adventure at Universal Orlando, which is their second theme park. There is a thing called the Poseidon's Fury, which is sort of a walkthrough, but it's a young adventurer-like character, young scholar who goes into an ancient Greek temple, and we end up enabling a bunch of fire effects, and we're essentially just pressing a button. And they do a lot of the fire is about 4 feet in front of us, but to the audience it looks like
much closer.
It's right there, but even 4 or 5 feet in front of you feel the heat from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it is something that, especially with theme parks, they are very, very careful about.
Because you have to do it over and over and over again, and someone's going to trip, and someone's going to, something's going to happen at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the timing to enable the effect, it's very specific. Like if you're off by a second, it doesn't go.
So they're dealing with the fire. Elsa and the other Nazi colonel, whose name I don't remember, they find out that, hey, we got Marcus, so we don't need them. Let's kill him. And I love the line, Germany has declared war on the Jones boys. That feels like a line written for a trailer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Another little comedy bit of the Dad, what? Dad, what? Dad, what? As they're turning their heads the wrong way.
Dad! Oh, Dad! Oh, Dad! What?
Sean Connery has a great squawk. That last what?
And they kind of head over to the big giant fireplace, which is perfectly human size. And Indy's trying to get the rope to go off, and they trigger a secret passageway, and it spins around. And I kept thinking about put the candle back. And they turn into the radio room where a whole bunch of Nazis are, including this woman on the radio, and her slow turn. It's so funny.
Yeah. I would have loved to have been on the set for that direction. Again, slower. Boom, it totally works. It does totally work. And the looks on their faces.
It's that she screams, and they manage to hit the thing again just as the Nazis open fire. Sean Connery, this is intolerable. And finally, Indy gets out, and the Germans now open the door, and they end up on either side because now the fireplace stops in the middle, and the Joneses drop down on top of them. Indy takes one guy out. Henry isn't taking anyone out. Indy stops the door with a statue, grabs the stuff, takes out another guy, and then they end up in a room with a dead end. And the level of silliness of this movie is much higher than Raiders.
Yes, 100% agree.
Because now Sean Connery, Indy's going like, what do we do? And he says, well, I find if I just sit down. And he sits down on a chair and leans back and then opens up a secret passageway spiral staircase that Indiana Jones tumbles down. And this is what we're going to see is amount of effort necessary for Indiana Jones to save the day compared to the ease with which his dad does it in ways that are very irritating to Indiana Jones. And we go downside and we're at some boats, and Henry's ready to get in the boat. And Indy starts up the boat and he sends the boat away. And I love Sean Connery's sort of sad.
What about the boat? We're not going on the boat.
No boat? The Nazis come out. They see the boat go away. They get in the boat. And then out come the Joneses on a motorcycle with a sidecar knocking them down.
Right.
Why did they wait a little longer?
The next action scene that this was added, that whole big motorcycle chase, this was added after because they watched a test cut of the movie and they're like, there's not enough action in the second act here. So they shoot that whole motorcycle chase on Lucasfilm Ranch.
Yeah, it's right off Mount Tam, which is literally a few miles from where I grew up.
So you figure, I don't know. I mean, they didn't intend for them to be followed at that point.
Oh, maybe that.
Maybe it was supposed to go from them driving away to them pulling up to the sign where it says like Berlin or wherever the other city.
And this is, by the way, a suggestion from Michael Kahn, who's the editor. We talked about Raiders, and this guy, most of the big Spielberg films, Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, AI, Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, Terminal, Munich, Lincoln, Warhorse, this Close Encounters, and 1941. This is Spielberg's main editor. So this guy is one of the great editors of all time, and this decision to add this action sequence is great.
Yeah.
When they ride off and Indy's on the motorcycle and Sean Connery's in the sidecar and Indy's kind of intensely excited and looks over at Dad, who is just sort of disapproving.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I mean, because you can't keep forgetting the fact that this is James Bond. The whole time you're watching it, right? His inability to fight, his stumbling into the escapes, then how he sits in the sidecar like a little child, and his just all grumpiness about the whole situation.
His disapproval,
right? Yes, which I'm sure Indiana is very experienced with that face, and so it only adds to his frustration.
And so even though he's fighting Nazis and saving his dad's life, he still can't escape the disapproving relationship with his father, even in the midst of this high-speed motorcycle chase.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I feel like the one moment of action that Indiana Jones does get the approval from his dad is when he grabs that flagpole.
I agree.
And he jousts.
Yeah.
Because there's a perceived sense of honor with that kind of contest. Well, but when he follows it up with jamming the broken pole into the motorcycle spokes, creating a much more spectacular win, that he doesn't like. No, that was not fair.
You're showing off now.
Well, and honestly, when you're on a quest for the Grail, jousting is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
True. And so we take out some of these motorcycle guys, and then we arrive, which is where we were supposed to arrive without this action sequence, at the crossroads.
We're going the wrong way. We have to get to Berlin.
Brody's this way.
My diary's in Berlin.
Why do we need the book? We got the map. We know it's Alexandria. What else do we need? And that's when we find out that he who finds the Grail must face the final challenge.
3 devices of such lethal cunning.
Booby traps?
Oh, yes.
Sean Connery is so excited because he's got the clues. And Indy goes, well, what are they?
Can't you remember? I wrote them down in my diary so that I wouldn't have to remember.
Which, by the way, they're pretty short clues.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you could have remembered those 3 things.
That's a pretty thick diary.
I was going to say.
He's been jotting in it for decades.
Yeah.
Half the German army's on our tail, and you want me to go to Berlin?
And Sean Connery says the only thing that matters is the Grail. And this goes to the essential theme of not only of this movie, but to some degree things we talked about in Raiders, which is in Raiders, the most important thing is the Ark. And over again, Indy has the choice between saving Marion's life or saving the Ark. And he chooses the Ark. And now he's with his dad, who says the only thing that matters is the Grail. And in his childhood, what did Indy felt matter more? Himself or the Grail?
Right.
The Grail was always more important. And Indy says, what about Marcus? And he says, Marcus would agree with me.
2 selfless martyrs. Jesus Christ.
Slap.
That's for blasphemy.
And by the way, you can't discount Harrison Ford's face. You talk about Connery's faces, but Harrison Ford's faces throughout this movie are great, as his son.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
The slap and And like, it's just like, when's the last time Indiana's been slapped in disregard like that?
Right.
And it was like,
where he didn't punch the guy
where he
back.
punched the guy, right. Just the look on his face, it's just like the shock of it all. It's so brilliant. And he reduces him back to being his son in that moment. After this incredible action sequence where he's proved his manhood, there's the slap in the face to reduce him back down again. He was like, oh my God, from a lower position.
Yeah.
From a lower position. It's all works so well.
It's great. It's a great, great moment. And then Dad says,
the quest for the Grail is not archaeology. It's a race against evil. If it is captured by the Nazis, the armies of darkness will march all over the face of the earth. Do you understand me?
And Indy's response is,
This is an obsession, Dad. I never understood it. Never.
Neither did Mom. Oh, yes, she did. Only too well. Unfortunately, she kept her illness from me. After all I could do was mourn her.
2 sentences.
Yeah.
Or 3 sentences. That tells us that's all the backstory really we're going to get. But there's so much here. Like, one of the things I was wondering is, like, how old was Indy when Mom died?
Well, you get the sense she has died before the opening sequence.
Yes, I think so too.
And I think she died a fair amount of time before the opening sequence.
Yeah, maybe he's 11, maybe 12.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Just because he's cognizant of the Grail being more important than his mom, right? So you have to have that certain level of cognizant understanding. I think that's 11, 10, 11, or 12 for it to become a issue as a teenager against your father, right? And I think that's what it feels around that kind of formative years, those formative years.
And I think when he runs in with the cross, it's not I'm running from these guys, it's look what I found, Dad.
Yeah.
Right.
He's trying to make a connection with him.
Right, because Dad is searching for lost things, and that's what he's done. I think you can't discount that at all. I agree.
I also think this is a window into their perception of that situation.
Yeah.
I think they're both lying to themselves. I think he's lying that, Mom was mad at you for this or this, because maybe Mom did say something to Indiana, that Grail all the time, blah, blah, blah. And so it frustrated him that, his dad didn't take care of his mom. But he's saying, your mom did me a favor, understood it was her love of me and knowing what I loved in the Grail, how important it was for me to find it. That's why she hid her illness. Somewhere in the middle of these two perceptions of the situation is the truth. And I love that they both have their own narrative about this situation, as happens in relationships and families.
I think it's a brilliant piece of writing because I agree totally with what you said. And I think they both have truth.
Yes.
Is that they both constructed the events in a certain way. So we have Dad who didn't know his wife was dying and was just obsessively doing his Grail stuff. And we have the son who has got to feel this tremendous loss. And then he's with this dad who's not giving him any emotional anything, And so you think of the nature of this house had to be so let's say it's from 11 to 18, 7 years of being a really, really quiet.
Oh, yeah.
Emotionless place. I also think, by the way, because let's say Indy was 11-ish. Again, we have very slim evidence that we're analyzing this based on, but do you think Henry's Grail obsession before and after the death of his wife was greater, lesser, or the same?
I imagine it was great and it became greater.
That's what I think too. I think he probably was more connected to life and his family and his child before the death of his wife. Yeah. And when he being unable to deal with the emotion of the death of his wife, he turned even deeper into the Grail rather than connecting with his son, who obviously really needed him. And again, it goes into all these things about screenwriting. I'm sure you think about this is what show don't tell really means, is that you have little tiny, it's not that you said, if they had said, oh, well, Mom died when I was 11 and you did this and I did this and you said that and I said that we would have a better feeling about what was happening. It's because it's fairly thin, but because it's filled with a lot of subtext that we really connect to the characters in this moment emotionally.
Well, and it's also delivered with a lot of subtext.
Absolutely.
That's what I was going to say as well. I mean, that's the combination of really good writing meeting really good acting.
Yep.
And we cut back to a close-up of Indiana Jones, who turns and looks up at that crossroads sign. And as the camera pushes in and in, we hear the rising sound of a Nazi rally. And that seems like as good a time as any to end part 1 of our exploration of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. As always, we want to hear what you think about this film. Just visit us on our Facebook page, do a search for the Cine-Files. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places. You can support us and even pick a film or listen to our Cine-Files shorts at patreon.com/thecine-files. You can buy or stream Last Crusade along with every other movie we've ever reviewed at cinephiles.net. You can follow me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. John is at The Roca Says at both places. Our special guest, Shannon McClung, is Shannon_McClung. And of course, you can also subscribe to our podcast feeds. On Twitter, that's Cine_Files, and on Instagram, it's the Cine-Files Podcast. So that is it for this week. We'll see you next time for part 2 of Last Crusade on the Cine-Files.